Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and welcome to part 2 of our review/overview/game diary for the MgT2 Traveller campaign, Secrets of the Ancients. In part 1, we covered the campaign setup, and we met our heroes as they went to Regina to recover their uncle's body and hunt down his murderer. And yes, it really is pronounced that way, just like the capital of Saskatchewan, so blame Canada. In fact, the gas giant Assiniboia that Regina circles, yeah, that's the name of a town outside of Regina, so I don't think that's a coincidence. This video we're going to be covering Chapter 2, Homecoming. Now, unlike the first adventure, which was an investigative scenario with a big urban backdrop, Homecoming is set in a small town where social interactions are the main focus of it, and we get to learn a little bit more about dear Uncle Vlen and a few of the secrets that he might have had. This also features one seriously big railroad moment, where the characters are just assumed to make a major decision, and if they don't make that decision, then the whole thing sort of falls apart. So I'll show you how I dealt with that, how I gave the players a reason to do the thing, and some of the contingencies that I had in place in case they decided not to do the thing. Now, one thing that I didn't cover in the first video, really just due to timing, is the campaign book itself. It's 256 pages, and while I very rarely ever discuss the quality of the book, the physical qualities of it, this one is definitely worth mentioning. The pages for it are stitched together, and they are on very, very thick paper. Like, so thick I regularly think that I've grabbed 2 pages when I've only grabbed one, and it is like really nice paper that this thing is made of. Now, to compare that, the core rule book is 264 pages, just a little bit larger, about the same size. However, the campaign book is noticeably thicker than the core book that is about 10 pages longer than that. So the reason for that being is that heavyweight paper. So it's definitely worth mentioning that the campaign book that this is actually printed in is really, really nice. And while the campaign book does have the library data in the back, one complaint that I have with it is the handouts, which are kind of important in order to do the campaign. They don't appear anywhere inside the book itself. So Game Masters, you'll have to go to the MgT2 website and download them, and they're free to do that. But honestly, it irritates me that that's even necessary to do in the first place. They should have either appeared in the individual chapters that they're necessary for, or in some handout section that's in the back of the book. So anyone who picks up the physical edition of the book from a game shop or on Amazon or wherever else, just be warned that you still need to go to the MgT2 website to download the free handout pack, though I still believe that some handouts should have been in here, and then you could go to the website and download a printable version, but it just really upsets me that they're not actually in the campaign book. Anyway, Chapter 2 itself is 25 pages, but a significant part of that is images and maps, so this one plays much faster than Chapter 1 did. We completed it from start to finish in about 8 hours. Now, once again, our heroes are Lily, Varger pilot, and Belter, who likes to think of herself as a pirate but is more of a wannabe. Otto Otter Backett, mechanic and former scout and intelligence agent. Peachy Brevis, scientist, former scout, and owns 50% of the ship. JR, the ship's engineer who owns the other half of the ship, and Benjamin, retired naval captain and highly decorated war hero, including the Imperial Starburst for extreme heroism. Sadly, Benjamin's player had to miss this session, so think of his characters just being more faded off in the background for this one. They're joined by Killjag, a crew droid that Peachy rebuilt, and Squirt, an adorable seed spitter who keeps the ship free of vermin and Benjamin keeps threatening to eat. Their ship is the Beck's Halo, or Beck's Revenge, depending on who you ask, an extremely modified laboratory ship that they call home. And I'm Jack the NPC. I'm here to give it to you from a player's side of things as I get to confront the root of all my issues, my parents and my small-town squabbling family. But before we go any further, I must warn you that there will be spoilers, so any players in the audience, please stop here. Send your Game Masters this way for tips on running the adventure for you. But if you keep going and you spoil yourself, you'll be cut out of the will. Okay, Game Masters, let's get this thing started. We last left our heroes as they began the 5-parsec journey from Regina to Alell. They carried some cargo and they did some training. No one wanted to join Lily for some melee training, so this is going to come up later on, so just know that nobody wants to train melee with her. She also discovered the disabled micro-tracker that Imperial intelligence had hidden in her clothes when she'd been arrested on Regina.
Holy crap, guys, we need to be extra diligent to make sure we don't get bugged.
Yeah, right. No one is ever going to get a bug on me. After a few weeks, they made it to Otter's homeworld of Alell. Now, in episode 1, I mentioned that I required that all the player characters come from one of the worlds in the Regina subsector. So before the session, I gave Otter's player a pretty thorough dossier on Alell, his hometown of Vaca Goya, and the family that he should expect to encounter at Uncle Vlen's funeral. Now, most of this is simply pulled from the campaign book and reorganized in a player-friendly format. A little bit more came from the Traveller wiki. I also added a few NPCs, such as Otter's mother and father, and then made Thomas Beckett as Otter's brother and Hans Beckett as his cousin. I strongly encourage any game masters to do something like this. If any of their players elect to have their character be family to Uncle Vlen, I stick a link down in the video description below for any GMs out there wanting to check out what I had made in order to, use that and change it up and make one for their own game. Alell is a strange jungle world. The radiation from the system's stars results in beautiful auroras dancing across the sky, and the radiation also does a number on the electronic communications and sensors that are in the system. Its strict laws protecting the flora and fauna have resulted in it being classified as an amber zone world with a law level rating of C. The planet lacks a high port, so the player characters left the Beck's Revenge in orbit and took their small craft down to the surface. The downport is an enormous stone pyramid, a remnant from the First Imperium. Entering it, their ship is scrubbed with lasers and any chemicals to remove any microscopic contaminants that might be on it. The planet has strong biological protocols in place, and the travelers are going to be subjected to all sorts of tests and scans and disinfection before they're allowed planetside. Furthermore, characters who are not of Vellani or Solomani descent must wear some sort of overgarment with these little helmets to keep any airborne contamination to the minimum. Now, for my game, I treated those more like beekeeper suits than like hazmat suits or anything. Of course, they can also use vac suits for this, providing they can maintain their air supply for a couple days. Now, while scanning Uncle Vlen's corpse for contaminants, a sensors glitch requires that they do this a second time. Now, the reason behind it is because of the Ancients technology that's in Vlen's brain, but I suggest that game masters show other sensor glitches starting from the moment their ship arrives in system, so this doesn't seem to stand out too much and only really looks like a hint in retrospect versus at the time it being the only time they've seen a sensor glitch. Weapons are also heavily regulated here. In fact, all weapons are forbidden on Alell.
What about my sword?
And my nanoblade axe. Or hatchet. Because a later section talks about buying machetes on the planet, I ruled that blades for cutting through jungle would be totally okay to have. Also, armor appears to be fine here, as the same section talks about them picking up mesh and jack and flak armor for dealing with Alell's wildlife, so game masters should freely allow them to use those types of armor. The only weapon that's allowed is mister guns, which spray a chemical that repels Alell's hostile wildlife. Now, getting to the town of Vaca Goya requires an air raft that's outfitted with misters to keep it safe from any sort of animal attacks. So the player characters, they can get a ride from a shuttle pilot named Rao, and she can give them an introduction to the world and pass on this little story about how she once dropped Uncle Vlen off in the middle of nowhere for a week, and this is going to be an important story later on. Now, if any of your characters do have an air raft and they want to take that to Vaca Goya, you can say that the modification to add the misters and everything to it, that's going to take a couple days to do, probably more time than they have available right now. But for my game, Otter got an air raft during character creation, and we decided that it would be reasonable to assume that the Mr. modification had already been added to it, as Alell is his homeworld after all. But I told him that there wouldn't be enough room for all the player characters in Uncle Vlen's cryopod once those tanks had been filled up with whatever goes inside those misters. So JR and Lily hitched a ride with Rao, and that's where they got the story of Uncle Vlen. So in a pinch, game masters, you might also have Rao relate this story to one of the player characters during the wake later on if none of them take a ride with her, but it's kind of important that you go ahead and put that in there because they'll want to know that later. After a few hours, the travelers arrived at Otter's hometown of Vaca Goya. Now, the adventure doesn't offer a map for this, so I made one. It's a small village of about 1,000 people, surrounded by metal poles armed with these motion-sensitive mist sprayers to keep out the wildlife. I also added that they have these little green lights atop them to indicate when they're functioning, so, game masters, you could use that and, have those lights flip to red as they, some of them might start malfunctioning, or the mist sprayer thing goes empty, and, now the player characters and all the townspeople have to scramble to keep all the animals out. Wow, my old stomping grounds. Somehow everything seemed a lot bigger when I was a kid. Yeah, that huge lake that you told us about is barely a pond. Upon arrival, they'll bring Uncle Vlen's body to the village hall for the wake, and here we get to meet a cast of NPCs. Porter Sajan, the village mayor and their religious leader, he never really liked Vlen and wants all of this over with and things back to normal. Then Thomas Backett, who operates the general store and is Otter's brother. Then Hans Backett, a professional hunter and woodsman, is Otter's cousin. He believes that Uncle Vlen had a fortune hidden away and doesn't want anyone else getting their hands on it by any legal means. Chatting with the family learns a few things about Uncle Vlen, such as nobody knows exactly how Uncle Vlen was related to everybody or exactly how old he was. Even old Nariel Backett says he was introduced to great Uncle Vlen back when he was a little boy, and now Nariel is as old as God. There's also learned that Uncle Vlen was rumored to have a lodge out in the jungle somewhere, which lodges on Alell are sort of the status symbol to have a secret cabin out in the wild that you have to maintain and go to without, any sort of support or anything. So nobody knows where his lodge is, but suspect that it's stashed with lots of his off-world souvenirs there. Now, one thing the adventure never mentions is where the travelers are going to stay while they're here. Now, I assume there might be a small inn or an Airbnb or the like, but we had it where Otter stayed at his parents' house, and then some of the other player characters stayed in Vlen's house that was in town, because the adventure does mention that he did have a house there, which, there's not really anything of interest inside of it, except there will be some evidence that Thomas broke in a few days earlier searching for Uncle Vlen's will. As the day goes on, more visitors are going to arrive for the wake. Arisa and her son Bard Jassel, who are from a branch that moved off to the Startown city and now look down on all their countryside folk. Arisa claims to have helped purge records of Vlen's bringing a ship onto the planet to avoid an Imperial ship, the Alell, and says that Vlen promised in return his ship as payment whenever he died, so she's come to collect and gather his ship. Bard is a spoiled city boy twit who thinks of himself as some big game hunter. So Vlen promised you his ship, and as proof, you brought evidence about how you broke the law by altering the Starport's records? Yeah, good luck with that. Then Yassel Parad, a gnome crime boss from one of the cities, arrives with 2 of his bodyguards. Parad claims that Vlen borrowed 1 million credits from him 10 years back and he never repaid it, so he wants his money back and with interest. Then 4 monks from an off-world cult called the Brotherhood of Humanity showed up. Their leader says how years back Uncle Vlen joined their order but vanished one night around the same time one of their cherished relics went missing. It took them years to learn his true identity, but they have documents that Vlen signed when he was initiated, giving the Brotherhood all of his worldly possessions, so they've come to collect. Not so long ago, I would have called you a liar, but given all the stuff I've recently been learning about Uncle Vlen, you might be telling the truth. Yeah, he totally stole that relic. The final guest to arrive that night is a woman named Arisa Backett, who claims to be Vlen Backett's wife. She's from a backwater world and says that she and Vlen had this whirlwind romance. Then shortly after their marriage, he had to go off to Regina for some business with a Mr. Yasha, and she produces what appears to be a completely legal and real marriage certificate. Yeah, I don't believe for one moment that she married Uncle Vlen.
No way. She's a con artist looking to get Uncle Vlen's money.
Or a government spy. Yeah, she's an agent with Imperial Intelligence under Gant Holsist, who was able to secure a real marriage certificate for her. Now, one thing with her backstory is that I specified that they had honeymooned on Rylanar, where Vlen went to some auction and then he had to leave for business shortly after. The reason being is that the travelers should know from the tickets that were found on Vlen's body in Chapter 1 that he had recently arrived from Rylanar, and that's something that Imperial Intelligence would certainly know. So there's no reason to put holes in Arisa's story because it's already sketchy enough as is. I mean, no one is going to believe that she's actually some young country girl that Vlen fell in love with and married. Holy crap! I have an aunt now? Guys, I trust none of these money-hungry leeches but her. I'm still unsure if the player was role-playing this or if the player legitimately believed this story. Now, Arisa is very touchy, hugging the travelers and anyone else in her new family. Now, the truth is that she's patting them down for weapons, and I also had her place a micro-tracker on Otter at some point when she was giving him a hug. Now, another thing that I changed about her was I upgraded her basic body pistol to something a little bit more exotic and powerful, but still covert, something a spy should have. Eventually, after some minor dramas between the guests, the wake winds down and everyone starts off for bed. Now, once night had fallen, JR snuck into the house that the Brotherhood was staying in, broke in looking for any sort of proof refuting their story, but once inside, a terrible roll resulted in him tripping over a little shrine and he hurried back out before anyone caught him. But as he emerged back outside, he spied a figure entering the jungle outside of town. Now, JR remained hidden and watched, and a few minutes later, a rifle shot nearly hit Otter back at his house. So JR radioed the shooter's position as he was watching him circle back in town, and Lily then tackled them to the ground.
Okay, Chuck, get up. Who are you working for?
It was Bar Jossel, who hadn't intended to shoot Otter but was trying to shoot Thomas Backett.
Okay, yeah, it's a slight relief that you weren't trying to kill me, but screw you for trying to kill my brother.
Now, this event is intended to where the shooter's identity remains a mystery, but I disagree with that. First, it's not satisfying if discovering the shooter is impossible. And second, Bar Jossel isn't an amazing hunter. I mean, he's mid at best. And travelers with some good rolls should be able to find the shooter's position and maybe even some incriminating tracks or any other clues like that. So I say that you have Bard's identity be discoverable. It was also fun just to have JR noticing this shadowy figure sneaking off into the jungle well before that shot was fired. Now, the travelers marched Bard over to Porter Sajan's house and reported what had happened to him, and they said that they wouldn't press charges against him if the Jossels stopped at their claim on Uncle Vlen's ship and just left town after the funeral. The next morning, after a brief service, Uncle Vlen was buried out in the fields, as is Alell tradition, his body intended to enrich the soil for human consumable crops. Now, after the service, Porter Sajan called a meeting at his house with all the people who had been vying for claims on Uncle Vlen's estate. He'd hoped that the travelers had brought a copy of Uncle Vlen's will with them, as nobody's been able to find one in town. Now, they all agreed that Vlen might have left a copy at his jungle lodge, and Porter Sajan asked the travelers for help in discovering its location. Now, because vines have surely covered it by now, finding the lodge by air could be impossible to do. So the best search option would literally be going out in the jungle and hunting for it. Now, Hans Backett volunteered to join them as their guide. Now, Arisa wants to go as well and see Vlen's lodge. Yasul Parad wants to send his bodyguard Morgan with him. Now, Bar Jossel would have wanted to go, but he and his mom quietly left town after the funeral. Now, this portion is meant to be this expedition through hostile jungles with people they don't entirely trust and facing off against all sorts of wild animals and natural hazards until we have a successful encounter roll of 13 or higher. However, when we did this, my player said,
"Yeah, Otter's got his own air raft, so we're gonna take that, and the rest of you jerks can go trudging through the jungle and get eaten if you like. Guys, find out where that one pilot lady dropped off Uncle Vlen that one time. I'm guessing his lodge is near there."
JR called up Rao and wired her some credits for directions to where she had dropped off Uncle Vlen that one time. Now, the adventurer says that they can try flying there, and a successful navigate of 10 or higher gives a +4 to the wilderness encounter roll where they have to make a total of 13. And I can only assume that that navigate of 10 or more is with Rao's directions, but it doesn't really say what the difficulty would be if they don't talk to Rao and get directions, or if that's what it is without directions and talking to Rao gives them a plus. So I'm not really exactly sure what that means, but we went ahead and treated that was with the directions. And even then, with a +4 to the wilderness encounter roll, most of the obstacles are ground-based, like bogs and quicksand, poisonous plants, and cliffs, meaning that the only encounters that really affect them would be the torrential rains, insect swarms, or flying animals. So Game Masters, I suggest that if your players do attempt flying out there, that you focus on those types of encounters, and I also consider some additional things to this, such as they have engine trouble, or maybe they have to check to make a dodge of some flying birds that are coming from one direction, or maybe a radiation burst does a number on their sensors and causes some sort of failure on their air raft or their ship, and it forces them to land and make some repairs to their vehicle before they can continue on, and maybe while they're on the ground some animal might come wandering up to them. Now, for my group, they rolled incredibly well on this check, and they found that lodge with no problem at all, which was great that they succeeded so well. I'm happy they did, but at the same time, well, that was easy.
Yeah, I'm kind of bummed I didn't get to fight a dinosaur.
Yeah, one of the criticisms that my players had later on after the session was that they were disappointed because they had rolled so well for this and they didn't have any random encounters. Anyway, after setting down in an overgrown landing strip, the travelers follow an old trail. They found a strange metal hatch in the ground that they couldn't open from the outside. Now, personally, with this, I worry that some players that find this might fixate on it, spending the next 3 hours of game time trying to open it. So Game Masters should make it clear that the trail continues on past this hatch. I also added that any travelers with military experience will recognize that this hatch is a missile launch tube, meaning that it's not an entrance to some sort of underground base, and it's not something that they should be messing with too much. Now, eventually they discovered the lodge itself, buried beneath a canopy of moss and vines. Now, one thing that I changed here was that I upped Uncle Vlen's security on this place. The adventure simply had them walk inside, no mention if there's even a lock on the door or not. Now, I added that there was a very heavy door and a laser turret. However, Vlen Vlen's security system recognized the biometrics of the inheritors, specifically Otter, JR, and Benjamin. So as they got close to the lodge, Otter noticed a faint flash from the security system in his eye as it ID'd him, and then the turret that they hadn't even noticed yet then kind of swung back and back up into some sort of little roof niche, and then they heard the door automatically unlock. This is a non-obstacle that I added, just meant to illustrate Vlen's paranoia and his extreme levels of technology that he has, and it's not meant to pose any actual danger to them. Once they stepped inside, I added this video recording that just started playing on the screen, and it was Uncle Vlen on the night that he died. He is clearly drunk and high on Tusal as he records his final message to the inheritors. Now it's clear that Vlen knows that he is about to die, and he says that he sent off a signal to wipe his data cores at the lodge, but doesn't know if it's going to get them all, and there's also all the physical items that he wouldn't be able to remove. So he apologizes for what it is they're going to learn about them, saying that he never wanted to hurt them and how he's tried to make it right by bringing them all together because he trusted them. He gives them the Starhunter to do with as they wish and warns them not to take any crap from Gand Holsist, which I had hoped that me mentioning this would encourage their decision in a few minutes. I also wrote this all out as a handout to read and review after I delivered an arguably fantastic performance. Again, I had really hoped that they would have caught that part about Gand Holsist. Unfortunately,
yeah, I stopped paying attention to that message once Uncle Vlen told me that I was his favorite. I am sure that nothing else important could possibly have been said after that moment right there, because that is the number one thing. Also, don't expect me to remember that my own backstory included that Gand Holsist once betrayed me and got me kicked out of Scout Services and that I hate his guts. Backstories are for other people to remember.
I've included a copy of this message down at the download link below. Now, it has been tailored for my players, so Game Masters won't be able to use this directly, but hopefully they could use this and modify it in a way that they could use it for their own game. Now, a search of the lodge discovered several interesting things. Many of these I also turned into handouts. There was a wall of books and notes on researching the ancients and their artifacts, a second copy of the tapes from Chapter 1 talking about the statue that was going off to auction, and a special note to get the ancients detector that Professor Anchinka had been working on and take that off to the Bojin system. The artifact that Vlen had stolen from the Brotherhood, which Peachy identified as an ancient droid leader rod. There's also a file of some aliases that Vlen Backett had used, some of them going back 1,000 years, and among them is evidence that Uncle Vlen was also the Regina crime lord Vinyasha.
Uncle Vlen was Vinyasha? Did you guys hear when he said I was his favorite? Benjamin is going to be so jealous.
They discovered that Vlen's personal computer had errored out whenever that erase signal had hit it, so Peachy went about canceling that command and hacking the computer to locate any deeper files. But the initial reading showed Vlen's extensive traveling and how he appeared to be operating with unlimited funds. They also found the gifts for each of the 3 inheritors. Vlen had messaged in his video that he had intended to bring them off to Bex Halo's christening on Afate, but hadn't been able to finish wrapping them. Now for this, I had asked each of the players for a list of what their characters would want more than anything in the world. Now, no higher than tech level 15, small enough to be carried in less than 1 million credits. Now, I was fully expecting some seriously game-changing, unbalancing, and amazing things that we were going to ask for, but I was wrong. JR received a fancy Starship engineering toolkit, but the real present was a hidden compartment inside held 3 seeds for Gargons, these psionic kaiju trees that come from his homeworld of Sias, and the reason that it's a red zone world. Now, Sias in the Traveller lore isn't described that much, it's only that it's a quarantine red zone world. So the player took that and made an amazing lore about his homeworld and why nobody was allowed to go there and why anyone there, no one was allowed to leave. But we'll get to that in a later episode. But these 3 seeds were priceless to him and were incredibly illegal to have in the Imperium. Benjamin got a nano hero drone, essentially a custom 1 centimeter replica of himself that he could play with and run through little action dioramas and obstacle courses. I thought that seemed a little bit low, so Vlen also added an antique ceremonial Aslan dueling pistol to the mix. Otter told me that all he wanted in the world were tickets to see Bimmy Juffet. That's literally it. So I gave him Bimmy Juffet's signed guitar, some tickets to a luxury resort where Bimmy was performing, and a self-cleaning Hawaiian shirt that gives +4 armor. Needless to say, Otter loved them. Now in the closet they found Vlen's vac suit, combat drugs, and a cache of weapons, all of which are illegal on Alell, while the FGHP is illegal everywhere in the Imperium. I also put all of these on little cards that I passed out to the players. That way we didn't have to stop and pull out the books and look what each of them were. Now, I find this really helps keep the game going and not slow down. And while I'm on it, I also did the same thing for Vlen's computer that Peachy was hacking. I added a few programs to it that would be appropriate for this computer to have.
Guys, I didn't know your Uncle Vlen that well, but I love him.
Anyone else getting the feeling that Seth is armoring us up for something really big that's about to happen? Did you guys see that great guitar he got me?
About this time, Peachy managed to crack the hidden files on Vlen's computer. There he discovered secure messages, one that should be impossible to intercept, but Vlen had some means of doing this. The campaign gives us this handout for it, but I made my own handout for it, adding a few personal touches. The first is from Captain Gant Hulsis to the Alell Starport Control, ordering them to lock down the port for a military action and to secure a specific small craft in the hangar, and I was already secured the target's laboratory ship that's in orbit. The second message is a live communication, so you talk about how this is actually showing up as the character is looking at them, and this is with a strike team outside the structure that the targets are inside of. I added a little note not to harm Blackbird, which was Arisa's code name, just in case she had a company of the PCs. I didn't know she was going to go with them when I was making these before the game, and the targets were considered to be extremely dangerous.
Holy crap, guys! We are about to have company.
Seconds later, a team of 6 Imperial Marines in power armor and grav belts called down for everyone to step outside and surrender. The Traveller's phone started ringing, and it was Gant Hulsis. He told them that they were under arrest, and failure to comply was treason, and while Vlen Backett managed to avoid justice for his crimes, the Travelers were going to pay for them. One of the Marines landed in the yard and started towards the lodge. The Travelers were still debating what to do at this time. They still hadn't opened the door, but right then, Uncle Vlen's security system activated, and this subsonic thud of a missile launch ran through the ground, and a second later, the Marine was annihilated in an explosion. The remaining 5 Marines went on the offense as more missiles started launching, so they started firing their plasma guns into the house because the time of taking prisoners was over. The PCs gathered everything they could and raced to a floor hatch that Otter had discovered. There they discovered a hidden cave with Uncle Vlen's junky-looking far trader, the Starhunter, hidden inside. Now this portion of the adventure is super-duper railroady. The player characters are expected to get the Starhunter started up and escape as these 5 pissed-off Imperial Marines are coming after them, while they're also evading missile launches every round. Now these Marines have 25 points of armor and are armed to the teeth. I decided that 3 of them had laser rifles, while 3 of them, including the one who was initially killed by that missile strike, had a PGMP plasma gun. Even then, they are clearly far more than the Travelers are going to be able to handle. Now, I had hoped that between the situation itself, 2 of the characters having a backstory that Gant Hulsis was a personal enemy of theirs and was already out to get them, and then Vlen's final message specifically warning them about Hulsis, that the players would get the hint. I was wrong.
We did nothing wrong, and I think we should be able to talk a way out of this. I'm just going to keep repeating to them that we're innocent and hope that they go away. I don't know what to do, and I'm afraid to commit to anything.
Meanwhile, JR and Lily raced into the Starhunter to get her ready. Stepping inside, they realized that what looked like a crummy ship from the outside was actually a souped-up Tech Level 15 ship with armor, thrust forward, advanced sensors, and more. Now, I only made 2 changes to this ship. First, because Vlen was flying this thing alone and he might get hurt, I swapped out one of the low berths with a Tech Level 14 autodock. I also upgraded the launch craft from this slow, basic model that you can find in the Traveller book to a Tech Level 15 one with Thrust 5 and holographic controls. And if I could do it again, I'd have added a stealth coating to it to kind of make it his kind of little stealthy little ship that he'd use back and forth. Now, the Starhunter's memory banks have also been fully wiped, leaving only the basic standard ship's library, so there's no way of checking this thing to see where it's been or anything else about it. Now, getting the ship restarted requires a task chain. It's 4 steps long. Unfortunately, each step takes 1 to 6 minutes, meaning that the whole process could take anywhere from 4 to 24 minutes. And in a game where those pissed-off Space Marines are coming to get you and a combat round is 6 seconds long, that is an eternity. Now, thankfully, the checks are of average difficulty, and increasing the difficulty can reduce the time to do them. However, the first edition of this scene shows a different time scale, with the first one being the same, but the other 3 being 10 to 60 seconds, which is far more appropriate for the situation at hand. So I suggest that game masters use that, because that's how the author intentionally wrote this to be. The next problem that we had is while JR is a very capable engineer, he is a terrible mechanic. And the first step in this task chain is a mechanic check. And our two good mechanics were still running around in circles outside, hoping if they shouted their innocence loud enough that these Marines would just simply pack up and go away.
You get the engine started. I'm going to borrow your new plasma rifle and hold them all off by myself.
Get those two idiots in here. I don't know what I'm doing.
Eventually, Lily got Peachy and Otter to agree that if they had no intention to surrender here, that the only other choice was to take the ship and escape. So once the power was back up in the ship's turrets could fire. Now the adventure describes the two turrets as being located aft and forward, but the deck plan clearly shows them being on either side, so I decided that the port side turret near the airlock was the sandcaster and missile launcher, while the starboard turret was the beam lasers. Now one area that I made a bad call at during this game was that JR jumped into the sandcaster turret and shot at the Marines outside. Now, the sandcasters, if they're shot at somebody in vacuum, they are devastating against soft targets, but in atmosphere, there's not really anything that they do. So I said that when you've got a Marine that's in full battle dress with 25 armor, at most it's nearly going to blast the paint off of their armor. Now, the player countered that it should maybe knock them back on their butts, but I said no to that because they're wearing power armor and they should be really tough. But in retrospect, I should have had it blow the Marine against the cave wall, taking them down for one full round for every canister load that's shot at them, so my bad. Meanwhile, Otter was trying to get the M drives online when my final addition to the Starhunter appeared. He heard a door open behind him, and then a woman's voice asked him if he required assistance. So after nearly jumping out of his skin, he turned around to see an astromech join that had activated when the ship's power came on. Again, I figured this is something that Vlen would have owned since he was regularly flying around the galaxy solo. Now, the mech's memory had also been fully wiped clean, which is why it sounded like an Amazon Alexa, which is their default voice, evidently. The player characters named this astromech Amelia, and with her help they got the drives online. And with the engines live, Lily blasted the Starhunter out from the cave and out towards freedom. They fought their way past two more flying Marines, then a trio of light fighters, and as the travelers broke atmosphere, they saw Gand Holsis' ship, the Alell, looming towards them. Now this ship is bigger, faster, more heavily armed than the Starhunter is, and there was no way that they were going to escape him. But just then, a new ship, something massive and strange, jumped into the system, far closer to the planet's surface than should even be possible. The energy burst from the ship jumping in, as well as some unknown interference, made all of their sensors go static and quickly blinded them to what was going on here. And the planet's clouds kind of warped and swirled around this big warship from some unnatural force, causing them to do this and obscuring the ship from view. Now, while the campaign never says how big this ship is, I told the players that they glimpsed something that they guessed to be between 80 and 100 tons, with this kind of long, twisted shape. It looked like it might have been made out of bone or ivory, and that was all before their sensors crapped out on them. Taking the window while Gand Holsis was distracted and his sensors were fritzing out, the travelers hit the accelerator and flew out to jump distance.
Okay guys, we got Imperial warrants after us and we gotta get someplace safe. I say we go to my homeworld of Afate. I got some friends there that can help us out.
And with that, the travelers jumped off to Afate, ending Chapter 2. Overall, we had a lot of fun with this chapter. It offers a lot of roleplay for the first half, and with all the different characters that they meet there, and then the adventure ends with a bang. I really do appreciate the roleplay tips that the campaign gives for all the NPC characters. I found that very, very useful. The big problem with this adventure is the ending. It is a massive railroad. The Marines are extremely powerful, and a single hit from one of their big plasma guns could easily turn a Traveller into ash. I mean, these guns can take out tanks with just 2 hits, so the Travelers stand no chance against these things. So I recommend having the Marines take their time entering the cave once everything has gone south for them, between Vlen automatic missile launcher going off every round, and then their own fear of walking into, headfirst into a second trap. They should be sufficiently distracted enough to give the player characters enough time to finish that first mechanical repair and completing the ship, and then the Marines can show up as we're trying to get that 10 to 60 seconds to get the power online as well as the ship's guns. Now, because I knew that there was a slight chance that my players might fail every single roll and get captured here, or not take the giant glaring hints that running was the best option for them to do and just surrender once the Marines showed up, I had a few contingencies ready. First, if the player characters are arrested, that appearance of the ancient ship at the end, once it appears in orbit, should cause a pretty big distraction for them. So while they're at the lodge and the ship appears in the distance, they can see all the clouds warping and everything because it appears right above Vaca Goya. All the Marines are going to fly off to investigate, leaving only one there to guard the player characters, right? And then that ancient ship is going to fire this blinding blue beam down into one of the fields, and that's going to send out some sort of EMP pulse that'll cause the remaining Marine's power armor to freeze up, or maybe some squelch goes off in his ears and he locks up or something. And that should give enough opportunity for the player characters to escape their bonds. And if Arisa is there with them, maybe the PCs can overpower her and take her hostage and escape in the Starhunter. If they fail that, the second contingency was as they were being loaded into the modular cutter at the starport to get flown back to the Alell. Again, some sort of distraction, an opportunity to escape their bonds, and then they might be able to take this cutter and fly that back to where the Starhunter is located and get that off the planet, or fly that back up to the Beck's halo in orbit and escape that way. Finally, if both of those first two ones failed, the next option was to do the adventure prison planet, and once they eventually escaped from there, we'd see if it was possible to continue the campaign or just do something else. Now, thankfully, I didn't have to use any of those, but Game Masters, I strongly recommend that you not only add a few indicators that running is the best option once the Marines arrive, encouraging the players to make that decision, but also have a few backup plans in case, just in case they fail their roles or they just choose not to make that decision. Okay, well, that is it for this episode. This one took way longer to do than I was expecting it to. I thought this one was going to be a lot shorter than Chapter 1, but I was dead wrong there. But join us for our next thrilling episode as the travelers get chased across the sector as fugitives in Chapter 3, The Hunt.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of our stuff, such as game reviews, how-tos, or even more of this series on Secrets of the Ancients, just hit that subscribe button. Till next time, travelers, you have a great day. The real Regina in Canada got in trouble for using the tourism campaign, Regina, the city that rhymes with fun. I think that would be hilarious to do something like that for the Traveller universe, like Explore Regina, the system that rhymes with fun. Put that on a t-shirt or something. Wait, hold on, you already did that. Link below if you want to pick one up.